and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Folks, we got a very special episode today. This is episode number 200. I've been doing this podcast we're moving into our fourth season now, so 200 of these. And I cannot tell you how excited I am for this episode. Because my guest today on our 200th episode is the very first guest that I ever had on the podcast way back when, guest number one. And, full disclosure, I'm absolutely in love with this person. And I'd better be because she's my wife. The unstoppable Cynthia Kersey. Cynthia, I want to just welcome you to the show for the 200th episode. Thank you for bearing with me as I've done 200 of these over the last 3.5, literally, 4 seasons. So
that's amazing.
Good to have you
thank
here.
Thank you. I've heard you do a lot of those. My office is up one above you, one floor above you, so I get to hear. And I just love how much fun you have. With these interviews. And so I'm just excited to be a part of it. I love you so much.
Well, I love you too. It goes without saying. And I particularly wanted to have you on the show, not because you were my first guest. I mean, that was certainly part of it, because I wanted this episode to be kind of a special episode, a milestone episode. But I also wanted to talk with you about something that is very, very dear to both of our hearts in one sense, but also in the work that both of us do. Particularly me in the business domain and you with the philanthropic side that you're working with. And it has to do with generosity, just the whole notion of generosity. And you've got a new book that you're working on right now called The Generosity Effect. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, I'd like you to take us back, if you would, and to where generosity first raised its head for you. What was going on in your life such that you started paying attention to this thing that we're calling generosity? And in the process, I'd like you to define what you mean by it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you, sweetie. And we are going to get into something where we've not spoken publicly about something. So I'm going to share with you how generosity came forward in a challenging time in my life 20 some years ago. And there's another challenging opportunity here. So we're going to share it. We're going to share both of them. But where it started was literally 25 years ago at Christmas. My then teenage son, Benjamin, and I were visiting my mom and dad for the holidays. And it's supposed to be this big, traditional family gathering. And 2 days before, my husband and I decided to end the marriage. Great timing, right? After 20 years. So needless to say, it was a little devastating for everyone. And, I'm supposed to be in the kitchen helping to fix dinner. And instead, I'm up in a bedroom with a box of Kleenex. And, I'm staring at the ceiling and I don't know where this thought came from, but it was like, I don't know what my life's going to look like next year, but I am not going to be at my parents' house feeling sorry for myself. I'm going to do something for someone else, anything. Like literally that was the thought. And I didn't know what it was, but that came through very clearly. And when we got back to LA after coming back from my parents' house, I called my mentor, Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity. And I told him what had happened. And he said to me something very profound. He said, when you have a great pain in your life, you need a greater purpose. And oh my gosh,
that's profound. Yeah, I get chills every time you tell that story. I get chills.
I know. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's just, there's so many examples to this, right? But there's so many examples to this, but so here we are. So back then, so what happened was, and I thought I was already living my purpose. I had quit my job, cashed my entire life savings, downsized my life to write my first book, Unstoppable. And the purpose was to inspire people to live their best lives, really.
Now,
And
that book, I want to just, I'm going to interrupt you here. That book, yeah, it sold
$500,000
hundreds of
copies.
thousands, 500,000 copies, been translated into a whole bunch of languages. And it was the basis for a whole business that you ended up, starting
Yes,
as a consequence. But
exactly.
that book, the book itself, Unstoppable. There's stories that inspire people to keep going. And these were stories about
Yeah,
people that kept going and
that's
achieved
right.
incredible things.
Well, it's like the hero's journey, those are the stories that are inspiring. It's not the people that make it like it seems like it's easy for them. It's those that had to overcome. I was inspired by those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's exactly, we see so many people that the power of the human spirit and being committed and determined really does make a difference. So I, quit my job, cashed my entire life savings, wrote my first book. And in 1 year, the book came out. And that's when Dave and I separated. So when I was talking to Millard, he said, I was like, I'm already living a purposeful life, right? I quit my job. I'm writing this book. I'm already living a purpose, but it was not bigger than my pain.
Yeah.
So when I talked to him about it, he said, well, why don't you build a house for a family in need? And I thought, well, that's a fitting suggestion for the founder of Habitat for Humanity. And so he had just got back from Nepal, and he said, it's just one of the most magical, beautiful places on the planet. And yet it's one of the highest levels of poverty, and which was really interesting. And you could build a house for a family for $2,000. And I loved that. So when I was out there speaking, I shared the opportunity. I called it an unstoppable Nepal build. And I took 50 people. How many people did it take? Oh, like 18 people to Nepal. The following holiday season, remember when I made that commitment?
Yep.
Following holiday season, I took 18 people to Nepal, and we were there for a few weeks and worked on the first 3 of the 100 homes. That were subsequently built. So
Yeah.
I did forget one little piece. When I came up, the purpose is bigger than your pain. So I'm a single mom, barely making it on a $14.95 book. I'd never raised money before. I'd never been involved in a philanthropic project like that, but it felt bigger than my pain. So when I was out there speaking that year, I invited people to be a part of it, right? $2,000, you can build a house or whatever you feel inspired by. And I raised $500,000 and was
Yeah.
able to, was it a half?
You got the hundred homes built, and there was some other stuff that
Yeah.
was made possible as a consequence of that. I mean, there was a lot. A lot was done there, and the idea of generosity. I mean, because it's embedded in that story in a very interesting way, I think. So, what was I guess the epiphany around that?
Yeah. So, well, first off, I thought the whole time when I was raising the money, I was doing something great for this community of people. That's kind of and it made me feel so awesome. Of course, that's what giving does.
Yeah.
But then when I got there and when I met them and when I like hugged them and they're like, please don't forget us. And just this whole emotional connection. I met the woman, Shanda, who had worked in a biscuit factory her whole life. And for 18 years, she saved the money to buy the land to build a house, but she didn't have the money to build the house. And with the Habitat for Humanity and this project, she was able to get a house. And it was very, very moving. And I just realized, oh my gosh, I was depressed when I went through my divorce and all that, but I got a purpose that was bigger than my pain.
Yeah.
And it just changed everything. And I was seeing this thing where it says, with the fires right now, I know I'm
Yeah.
whatever, with the
Well,
LA
fires in
fires,
LA.
right?
Yeah, LA
There's a
fires. Yeah.
picture of somebody standing in front of fires and it says, feeling hopeless, help somebody else. Help
Yep.
somebody else. And it's like the generosity is so generative, not only for the receiver, but for the giver. It's how many years, 20 some years ago, and I'm still talking about it. It was a major demarcation, in my life, is when the epiphany was, wow, when you give, you really are the receiver.
Yeah.
And I made more money that year, which was weird, selling this $15 book, $15, yeah, per book. Right. And then, so I started learning. I got very curious because I was raised in a Christian family and, all the scriptures, and it says, give and it shall be given unto you. Like, I did know that, but I hadn't really experienced it or played with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I started playing with it. And really, since then, I've worked with thousands and thousands of people who have been impacted by generosity.
Absolutely. And that, yeah, I'll fast forward in time here just a bit. Yeah, 17 years ago, you founded the Unstoppable Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and that came out of an experience that you had in rural Africa, in rural Kenya, I believe it was. But out of that, I mean, the idea of what can I give? I mean, because you had been asked, please don't forget us, when you were there. And again, kind of the conundrum of, well, what do I do? Who am I? What do I do? Kind of came into play with that. And the idea of generosity is steeped in expressions of loving kindness. How do I enrich the life of somebody else
Yeah.
without expecting a return? Without expecting a return. Now, the return's always going to be embedded in that in some way, shape, or form. But the altruistic side of that is, I'm just doing this. There's an effect. There's an impact that is rippled when you begin to operate from that premise. Can you talk a little bit about the generosity effect and where you see
Yeah,
that and
I
how you
will.
see that playing out?
Yes, thank you. And absolutely. And this is kind of how it all just came together. So in 2010, I'm at a crossroads in my business. So I'm, doing the unstoppable business. I'm speaking, I'm coaching people. But my real passion was about generosity and having these philanthropic projects. Like, oh, I loved that. But then I held myself back because I'm thinking, well, how do I support myself, teaching people to give, like, that lack, right? That scarcity thinking. And so I had read a book a few years prior, actually, and it was by Cammie Walker.
Mhm.
And her life was going great, and then she got diagnosed with MS. And she just, oh my gosh, she was in such pain. And the bottom line is her spiritual teacher said, Cammie, you're thinking about yourself so much and like what's not working, and you're making it worse. And she said, I want to encourage you to give away one thing every single day. And she's like, are you serious? Don't you see I'm in the hospital? I'm in pain. What do I have to give? And she said, it doesn't matter what you give. It can be a kind word. It can be a prayer. It could be change, right? But you do it from a place of abundance and gratitude. So she did it. And literally within a couple of weeks, she started walking again. Like her whole life changed because she realized she had a purpose still. She had a reason to live. And so I thought about her story and I thought, I'm going to do that, right? Every day. So I did I didn't call it the generosity. I called it the year of giving.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 things that I did every single day. So number 1 is you start with gratitude. So I got up really early, I poured myself a cup of coffee, I sat in my favorite chair, and I pulled out my favorite journal, and I said, okay, what are 10 things I'm grateful for? And, there are some mornings where, it's easier than others, right? And so
Well, yeah.
it's kind of funny because it's like how I couldn't come up with 10 things is kind of ridiculous. You and I do this practice every morning and every night, and it's like there's so many things. But anyway, so I went through that process, and then the next step is give to myself. Before we have anything to give to somebody else, we need to give to us. So it would be like working out, having a healthy breakfast, reading something that inspired me. So I created a practice every day that was giving to me. The next step is what you mentioned it, which is how do I enrich another person's life today? And I kept it very simple. Literally, it could be letting somebody pull out in front of you
Mm-hmm.
in the parking lot. Like, it doesn't have to be big things. But it's just being in a generative attitude. And what I noticed is when I came from that place, I calmed down a little bit. People get in front of you and all that. You're like, what are you doing? But you start calming down and being present because you're looking for how can I be a blessing to someone else? And then the 4th thing was, I'm going to give you another example real quick. So one of the examples of when I said, okay, how can I help somebody else? I was in the Marina Del Rey restaurant, and the waiter was awesome. And she was, she told me how she's going to nursing school and she's working these full-time jobs. And I just got inspired to tip the bill, where you're the bill and your tipping is like a double tip, right? Or a double, whatever.
Yeah.
And it felt so good. Again, and we've done this, but again, it's like when you give, we are receiving. And so it's like when I'm giving to her, it's like, wow, thank you, God, for being able to even do this and to be a blessing for her. So
Yeah.
again, you start your day with gratitude. Then you look at, okay, how can I give to myself? Who can I bless? Like, what can I do to bless somebody else? And in the book, I go into a lot more detail about what that could look like. But for the purposes of this conversation, it, again, like what Cami and Mabali said, her spiritual teacher, it doesn't have to be complicated. And then the 4th thing, and I think this is the most, I don't know that it's the most important, but I've experienced it from other people, is the most challenging, and yet it's critical, is to complete the cycle of giving and receiving. And so often we feel great about giving, but we don't feel great about the receiving. And a great example of that, and I'm going to go deeper into this in a minute. Yeah. But remember, Elizabeth staying with our dogs, and she's so generous. She's flying here to stay with our dogs when we travel. And then we went out. Oh, we were gone. We just got home, and she had bought me like these cookbooks, and she buys me things. And I'm thinking, I don't need anything. She's retired. Why is she spending money on me? That was my attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said something to her like, Elizabeth, I love you. We're so grateful that you help us. And she said, it makes me feel good when I can give to you. And I thought, of course it does. All people should know that.
Yeah. So that's to be able to generously receive, which is kind of an oxymoron in one sense, but to generously receive is literally a way that you close that circle that you were talking about. And and it becomes a virtuous cycle, because in no point in time is there any speed bump about, oh, I don't deserve this, or it's not good enough, or I'm not good enough. So there's a virtuous cycle that I'm hearing you describe that begins with gratitude and it ends with literally
Right.
generously receiving.
Receiving. And there's so many ways that I could talk about this. And one of my favorite is Cece Winans is a gospel singer, and she sings lots of great songs. And one of them is The Goodness of God is Running After Me. So the way that I look at it, and we'll get into a deeper dive on kind of what got me to this point, but I see all the blessings that come into my life as the goodness of God is running after me. So these are blessings. So when we say, oh, no, you can't give that to me. No. And we do feel unworthy. That happens. Oh, no, it's too much. Oh, no. What will so and so think? I mean, who knows what all we say?
Mm-hmm.
But when we generously receive, we are receiving the gifts from God, right? I mean, that's how I see it. And it makes me feel like, thank you, God. And I do this with you, Blaine. I say, the goodness of God is running after me in the form of Blaine Allen Bartlett. And that is a fact. So I
Yeah.
think I'm just going to jump into and give an example. So
Well,
what
yeah, but
happened was,
before we do that, I
what?
want to just, there's one
Okay.
point here that I think, you know, you had said something right at the, almost at the beginning here about a purpose bigger than your pain. And when we put it in the framework of generosity, of doing something for others, just kind of, how do I enrich another person's life? And Cammie's a great example of this. I do something. What that does is it connects me to soul. It connects me to spirit because it requires me to recognize that there is a connection, that
Mhm.
there that I am connected to whomever it is that I'm giving this gift to, whatever that might be. There's not an other out there, so it eliminates the othering phenomena, and now it's a we. How can I enrich the experience of living? And if you're enriched by this experience of living, I'm enriched by this experience of living. So there's a reciprocity that comes into play with that, which I think is just lovely. And from a business perspective, those of you that are running businesses, I want you to pay particular attention to this. Yeah, if you can find ways to be generous in what you're doing, and it goes way beyond customer service. It goes way beyond customer satisfaction surveys. Generosity is a way that you connect the soul of your business with the soul of your people, with the soul of your consumer, with the soul of your vendors. And there's a reciprocity that comes into play with that. And there's always something that's coming back out of it. So I wanted to just mark that up because I was struck by how you said that when you said it. And in my language, I translated it into connection to
Blaine
spirit.
speak.
Blaine speak. Yeah, put it in Blaine speak here. So
Yeah.
there was something that you've got another example of this that is far more current than what happened with your divorce from Dave and
Yeah. It was quite a
so
while.
quite a while.
Quite a
Yeah,
while ago.
quite a
Thank
while
God.
ago. That was 25 years ago. Yeah,
That's so history. That's
putting
so
water under
history.
the bridge on
I
that.
married
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Woo!
Now something happened in July of this
Yes,
past year, July of 2024, and I think that's what you're alluding
I
to.
am. So, Blaine left for Japan the day before to do his yearly teaching, consulting workshop. He has a whole thing that he does every year, and he's been doing it for decades. And I was in the kitchen. I just finished our team meeting, and I was heating up a can of chili, the Mary's organic chili. And
Has
all
to
of a
be organic.
sudden, organic, of course. And all of a sudden, I smelled it and I felt nauseous. And I'm like, oh, this is weird because I actually liked the chili. So I went and sat down on the couch. And then I called Mary Jo, our beautiful neighbor, and her daughter's a nurse. So they came over. And of course, I called you too. And we're kind of in the midst of everything that's going on. And they tested, like, well, I don't think you had a stroke and I don't think it's this. But if it happens again, you should call 911. And I'm thinking, really? This doesn't seem like 911 worthy. But okay. So, and I'm here by myself, and we live in a rural area, right? So I'm like, okay. So I started to feel better, back to normal. And the next morning at like 6 o'clock, I was up, just finished my meditation, and it happened again. And this time I'm shaking, and I called her, and she's like, hang up and call 911 and we'll be right over. So I called 911. The ER vehicles came, got me, and they were so sweet. Anyway, I get to the ER, and they said we want to make sure, rule out anything that could be hugely problematic. So they tested my heart, and then they did a scan on my brain. And unfortunately, they found a large malignant tumor in the right frontal lobe. Right? Is that where it
The
is?
front
Right here.
temporal, the front temporal lobe, right temporal
Yeah,
lobe.
that was it. Anyway, yes. And so here I'm getting this news. I mean, we were totally shocked. I was totally shocked.
Truly.
We had just gotten back from Kenya visiting our communities there. It was our wedding anniversary. Like, I felt great. It was shocking. And the prognosis was quite dire. And so and I didn't even like the word tumor. So the first thing that I said was, or pretty close to the first thing, which sounds weird, but I just couldn't even hold it in my mind like that. So I thought, this has to be an unexpected opportunity. Like, it has to be for me, not like, against me. Like, this is what I've learned, and what I've practice all of these years. And so it's like, there has to be something in this that could be a blessing to other people. So that was the journey. So, and that year, my word was faith. So every day, I would read something about faith, write it down, make up a little cool image. And thank God that year, my year was faith, because I was singing or listening to music. Like, that's how I got into CeCe Winans. She's got a song, Believe for It, about faith. I love it. So when I was getting, as you well know, so as I was on our way to radiation, I had to have radiation every day for 6 weeks. We would listen to CeCe.
Yep.
And a few other songs. And then I would go in there with the mask. I can't even, literally, it hurts my heart when I just even say it. But I was getting radiation, and I was very afraid about it. But I had a prayer that I prayed, and I anchored it. Like, I just saw the radiation is healing me, whatever. It was a choice that we made based on our diagnosis and based on the type of tumor that I had. It showed that it responded well to chemo and radiation. That's why we did it. I would have never believed. I did this big, huge speech to the kids. Like, you've got to respect my wishes. And I never thought I would do it, but I did do it. And I felt like I still do, based on everything, that was the right thing.
The right choice. Yeah.
One thing I want to say, though, about that real quick, if anybody's facing anything like that, Mary Morrissey's, just my best friend. And she was saying, it's like, you accept the diagnosis. It is what it is. They're facts, whatever. And then it's like, I deny the statistics, or the prognosis, the prognosis based on statistics.
Yeah.
Because it was the statistics that was so challenging. And then the final one is, I claim my divine prognosis, which is 100% health and healing.
Yeah. So that's an act of generosity in and of itself, to be generous with yourself. And this moves us into this the conversation around faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of how faith comes into play with this. Because we kind of fast forward a little bit here, just kind of in the interest of our time together. I don't want to shorten this up prematurely, but I do want to pay attention to this. We uh, consulted with a number of different oncologists and medical practitioners, both allopathic but also functional and alternative. And um, the allopathic doc, our oncologist, was pretty adamant about the nature of this disease. And it is what it is. This is what the statistics say. This is what, this is the data. The other oncologist that we were working with, and we continue to work with both of them. The other one was going, well, there's no reason you can't have the outcome that you desire, that you are positioning yourself, like you said, claim the divine right, the divine healing in the way that you want it. That's where hope resides, but it's also where faith resides.
That's
And when
right.
we were coming back from a meeting with our traditional oncologist, you can tell that story probably better than I would,
Yeah.
because you were on the receiving end of what he
Yeah.
said.
Let me tell it. So
Yeah,
basically, in December, we went to a treatment center, a functional medicine treatment center. It's called Sonavive Medical Institute, excuse me.
Institute.
And amazing. So we went there and it was just what I wanted, and all of these different types of treatment all under one roof. And they're all positive and they know the power of what we think and what we tell ourselves. And when I got there, I said, my goal is after 3 weeks being here, there's no evidence of disease. Do you think that's possible? Oh, yes, we think that's possible. Yes, they're like that. So I take some tests. My tests are looking really good. And they're like, you're doing great. We see you on the path to NED. No evidence of disease. You're doing great. We see a great outcome for you. That's what he said. We come home the very next day. I had to get an MRI with our, traditional place where we go get MRIs, right? With the oncologist. And so we get the MRI and then I talked to him about it and he said, well, I don't see any tumor activity. And I'm like, that's great. Does that mean that there's no evidence of disease in me? And he said, Cynthia, I would never tell anybody that has your diagnosis that they're NED because it's always there. That's what he said to me. And of course, it disturbed me because I wasn't expecting him to say it. B, we were holding this whole image the whole time. And I wanted the happy dance to no evidence of disease, like together, but and next time we go see him, and by the way, we really like him and respect him. And he doesn't understand the power of his words, whether he's worried we're going to sue him or whatever. There are ways to say things. I'm going to get him Norman Cousins' book, I think, The Biology of Hope.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
important.
it is important. And when we were on the ride back home after he had said that, we started dissecting that a little bit and just kind of exploring it, unbundling it. And this is where the notion of faith existing on a continuum, started to come into play here. And what you ended up, kind of landing on was, well, he has complete faith in his objective data being the only reality that is possible.
Right.
And the other doc has faith in the fact that healing is possible. There's
That's right.
you can't predict that. You certainly can't predict the future based on what's going on presently, because the future is yet to be unfolded. So where do you want to have faith? Where does faith exist?
Right.
It exists on a continuum. Who has control over what side of that continuum you want to stand on?
We do.
We do.
And let me tell you, when you get, I don't even know, should I even say what I was diagnosed with or does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I won't say
Well,
what it
you
is.
can if you'd like, but
Okay,
a
it's
pretty extreme.
glioblastoma.
Yeah,
So it's a it's like it's stage 4, blah 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 blah. And I don't recommend you look it up. And please don't send me anything negative because I don't want it.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
that's one
perfect.
thing I've learned is when you have your faith, you have to protect it and nurture it, because when you're constantly bombarded, whether your dream is to write a book or start a business or a foundation or whatever, you're constantly bombarded with the reality,
Quote unquote reality.
quote unquote. That's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we are constantly having to not believe what people say, right? It's
Right.
really like, what do we say? What do we believe? Let me just finish one thing, baby. And that we are not a statistic. And that's one thing Mary Morrissey said. It's like, how I'm approaching this is different than all the other people that that came up with it.
Yeah.
And this is how I feel like. I feel ultimately I'm holding for my 100% healing. I'm believing in it. I'm thanking God for it. And at the end of the day, it's thy will be done.
Yeah. And that's the
That's it.
generous thing to do. I mean, when we look at the generosity effect, there is an emotional consequence to being generous. And yeah, and that gets translated into what do I have faith in? You know,
Right.
what do all of us have dreams in our lives. I'm starting a business. I have a dream for it to, kind of to be successful. I have a dream about the difference it'll make in people's lives. And then the economy does what it does, or, I've got an employee that is egregious and does what he or she does. And so I can look at, what I'm dealing with today and go, well, my faith starts to dissipate. The generous thing to do is to reinforce that dream, to find ways to take a step toward that direction, to move in that direction. It doesn't have to be a big step. It can just be sitting quietly and just taking a deep breath. Yeah, soothing touch. Just kind of center yourself. And that's the generosity effect is a real thing.
It
It
is.
truly exists, and it is so powerful. I mean, watching what you have done with the folks that you've been interacting with on this healing journey, beginning with the surgeon that we worked with, that you worked with, and just kind of how you spoke with him and how you spoke with the nurses and whatnot. It was all, steeped in generosity
And gratitude.
and
And
gratitude.
gratitude.
Yep.
Like, so when I was in the hospital, getting the worst news that I'd ever received, you're in Japan. Obviously, I start to cry. And my neighbor was right there. And when the guy said what had happened, I'm like, are you serious? I said something else, but I'm not going to say it. But I'm like, really? And then she started to pray for me. And so what I started to do is what I do every single day anyway. I was constantly looking for, what am I grateful for? Well, look at this nurse. You know, it's an operable tumor, whatever, any little thing. And then I would be thanking them. And so I started to feel the generosity effect. So when I had my surgery, I was ready. So my practice was I would listen to the music. I would be thank you, thank you, thank you, God, like just grateful, and telling people how grateful I was for them. How can I bless them? How do I bless the practitioner who's working with me or wheeling me into the ER or whatever? Like, how do I bless them? How do I make their day better? And then how do I receive? So this is the thing about the receiving. Um, I'm normally more private, and I normally wouldn't say anything to anybody, certainly not go on Facebook or anything like that. But I called my girlfriend, Gabriella Taylor, because I really wanted people praying for me. So I told her and I said, do you think you could put a few friends together to pray for me and kind of be here with me? And she said, absolutely. And then she puts this group of people together. And you know this, I was so humbled and so deeply touched that people would give up, a couple of hours praying for me talking, with me about my experience. And I just sat there and received all the love. There was a part of me that was like, this is too much. It's too much attention on me. I felt like, oh, well, so and so had cancer, all of this stuff. Like, you can't take this, Cynthia. It's too much. But it's like, no, God's goodness is running after me through this prayer group. And it's been very profound. I have thousands of people that are praying for me.
Yeah.
And I'm humbled and I'm grateful. And every little thing that happens, there's so many different miracles that happened in us being able to go to Sonavive to begin with. And, we put on my intention. The very first thing is that I'm going to get access to the most cutting edge, effective treatments that support my body. And that's what ended up happening.
That's what we're doing. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting. Oh, so Fuzz, who's your cardiologist, I was telling him what had happened because I'm like, I felt like I was in heaven when I was in the ER.
Yeah.
I did. I was happy. I felt joyful. And he said, Cynthia, there is not a pharmacological solution that we can give you that you're giving yourself through this process of the generosity effect, which a big part is gratitude, right? And then service, and then being generous with yourself, and then receiving. Like, that's how powerful it is. If it was a drug, it would be very, very expensive. So it works whether you're getting a divorce, whether you're in the ER and they delivered some very, very challenging news, whether your house, like with all the LA fires. And this was another one, a dear friend of ours, Kathy Eldon, a neighbor who's a brain surgeon was out there with a hose, hosing down her house and others so it wouldn't burn down. And she said that she has survivor's guilt. That is another way of saying, oh, I feel like, oh, it was too much for me to receive.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy, whatever it is, right? But yet we need to be better receivers, because the better we receive, the more we have to give.
And that's what this episode is about. Whether you're in business, running a business, living your life, which all of us are living our lives, learning how to receive. And in order to learn how to receive well, you need to learn how to ask well. Mm-hmm. To be able to ask for, what do you need right now? What do I need right now? If my business is being struggling, what do I need? Maybe I can ask a vendor to do something, or whatever it might be, but I have to feel worthy enough to be able to ask. And there's a virtuous cycle that comes into play here. Cynthia and I both study this extensively, and the idea of becoming a center of distribution is really married to this notion of the generosity effect. What am I giving away? And it's not giving away. It's what am I contributing to the well-being of everything and everybody that, with whom I come in contact. That mindset is an abundant mindset. It's an abundant universe. There is no lack in the universe. Whether I'm running a business or living my life, if I can actually live from the perspective that there is no scarcity of love, of generosity, of care, of nurture, none of that is in short supply. So you've been listening to my 200th guest in the 200th episode. She was also my first, and the first shall be the last. This is not the last show. But Cynthia Kersey, my wife, my partner, and the CEO and founder of the Unstoppable Foundation. You can check them out at unstoppablefoundation.org. They are doing incredible work on this planet. And watch for Cynthia's newest book coming out. It's called The Generosity Effect, and it will be out by the end of this year. She's revising it just a bit, just given some current situational circumstances that are getting added into the copy of the book. So all of that's in process. I want to thank you for listening. This is Blaine Bartlett. You've been listening to The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. And like I mentioned just a moment ago, my admonition every sign off is find a way in your life to become a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. Nature works on distribution, and each of us are a part of nature. So let's act as if we are. And I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.